Let's face it, business technology is frustrating and complex. So how do you make sure it works for your team? To make IT right, start the discussion at go-domain.com. You're listening to Discussions by Domain, a podcast for business leaders. Our discussions may be with people you've probably heard of before, but the majority of our guests are in the trenches, professionals like you and I, with the same challenges and struggles of keeping up in the Northeast. They're implementing strategies, overcoming hurdles. They're leading the fastest growing businesses in our region. My name is Anthony DeGraw, Director of Partnerships at Domain Computer Services, and the host of this show. When I'm not talking with business leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of Domain and the ups and downs of our own growth journey, as we intend to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. All right, welcome to another episode of Discussions by Domain. This is the Flip the Script episodes with Jeremy Davis here on our team. And he is going to, he has a couple questions for me, but I think I'm going to switch it over to him to introduce what we're going to talk about here. But if you guys like this content, if this is content that you want more of, really trying to go in and dive deep into the conversations really that we're having on, I guess it would be more on the sales side in regards to managed IT services, cybersecurity, compliance, and all this stuff, and really trying to regurgitate that into video content, audio content that everybody can digest in the way that they prefer to digest content, I think is really the end game for this. And then secretly, Jeremy's using this to make himself better. So, Jeremy, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you lead, and we'll go from there.
Sounds great, Anthony. Thanks again for having me flip the script on you here. You did a great job of teeing it up. It's been a recurring theme throughout a lot of our conversations, on a lot of our calls, this concept of the 4 blocks, which really speaks to Domain's approach in service delivery. And what I've noticed specifically is that it seems like a lot of organizations in our space, MSPs in our space, focus on areas of the 4 blocks that we're going to discuss, but in particular are focused on 1 or perhaps 2. So I was hoping to tee things up before we even dive into the 4 blocks. I was hoping you could explain what it is that you find MSPs are most focused on in the 4 blocks. Is it service desk or support related elements of this mostly?
Yeah, so what we typically find, or at least in my 3 years experience, is that most managed service providers, and therefore most customers of managed service providers, are really judging the IT company based on what's called service desk. So I have an issue and I put in a support ticket from either email, phone calls, or portals, right? So most providers and clients are judging everything based on service desk. And then the next thing would be, I have a firewall with them. I have a backup device or backup system with them. So it's really kind of the very basics of service desk and backups, and it's either it's good, it's okay, or it's bad. And usually when it gets really bad is when people start picking up the phone calls and saying they need a switch, they want a different way to look at it. And then it's our job, mine, Jeremy's, to change the way they think or reframe the way they think about how IT should be delivered. And really, it's just an education point. If Jeremy and I are doing our jobs well, or our company's doing the job well, we really need to just reframe the way people think about getting IT support, what's included in it, what should be included in it. And if you have all the right pieces, or as Jeremy was mentioning, the 4 blocks, which I'll define after this question, if you have all the right pieces and they're all operating well together, you have a different type of approach and a well-oiled machine. Real quick to touch on 4 blocks and what Jeremy had mentioned there, there's a gentleman that's well known in the IT community, ran MSP, sold it. He's on the board of another MSP. He's actually in our backyard, and his name is Gary Pica. And Gary Pica designed a system called 4 blocks, in which an IT department is really made up of 4 different departments within one. And we'll walk through that here in the near future, but just to give people some reference on what 4 blocks means.
That's great, Anthony. And I want to dive in on 4 blocks, but I'm thinking that before we do that, maybe we clarify here for somebody who might know nothing about IT or perhaps has a high level understanding. We're talking about one piece of the 4 blocks in the service desk, the question you just answered. But what is a service desk? What do they handle?
Yeah, so actually, you and I both came from outside the IT industry, so and may have engaged in our other companies with only service desk, right? As a user and an employee in another organization, when you had an issue with your laptop or your desktop or your password or your email, you were usually given. I've been in large 5,000, 10,000 employee companies. I've also been in 20 and 30 employee companies. Depending on where you were at, you're usually given an email address or a specific person within your organization to reach out to with some sort of support request. Hey, I can't get into my computer. It won't start up right. I need a password. And so that's most people's experience with IT, is just that one function of how, when something goes wrong for me, how do I fix it without going to my boss? And that's really what a service desk is that reactive component, right? Something has happened and now I need to react to it. And who helps me do that?
Exactly. I think for most people, including myself, when you think of IT, it's exactly like you said. It's reactive, it's something broken, it's something that needs to be fixed. What I've come to learn and what I think we'll discuss here in the four blocks is that domains approach and the 4 blocks approach is much more proactive. Would that be a fair way of summarizing that?
That's a great way to say it. Yes, there is so much more that goes into making sure that those reactive issues that are popping up don't actually pop up. And if you're delivering IT correctly, the goal is actually to spend as little amount of time in the service desk area. And there's 2 reasons for it. There's a business reason. As a managed service provider, the more and more time we spend on servicing reactive issues, there's timelines, there's budgets, there's profitability that all come into play with that. The second and more important, in my belief, is that how does the customer view IT? If you're the end user and you are only experiencing your IT department when you have an issue, then technology is just kind of always a problem, right? The IT is only engaged when there's a problem. It's nothing ever fun and exciting. And Jeremy, I've never actually mentioned this before, just hit me in the head though. It's kind of like the difference between going to the doctor and getting a shot, which is maybe it's not the best example, but you're really not looking forward to doing that, or like calling Comcast on the phone. It's not something you're calling them because there's an issue. You're not really looking forward to doing that. But when Comcast brings you that brand new box that gives you the best Wi-Fi out there, or connects your entire house to a thermostat, or they're giving you that next level or the newest and coolest thing, or like you just got a new iPhone, I guess I'm trying to make the case of service desk can be looked at as like the thing I got to do that I'm not really looking forward to doing, or the people I got to call that I really don't want to call, versus the cool and exciting stuff that really gets us going and motivated around technology and what it could potentially do for us. And the goal is to spend, therefore, from domain's perspective, we want to spend as little amount of time as we can up in that service desk area, because we want our customers to be happy, proactive, working, productive, all of those good buzzwords.
Yeah, and it sounds like the service desk, speaking to the point of it being more issue related or reactive, could be a way to diagnose and prevent future occurrences of those issues. To your point about going to a doctor for a shot, not fun, prevents you from having to come back. Let's launch right into it. We've discussed the service desk. What are the other three blocks?
Yeah, so real quick though, I do want to touch back on Service Desk from a domain perspective and how we kind of set ourselves up a little bit differently in this area. I maybe have made it sound a little doom and gloom, but it's not. A high performing Service Desk team is needed. These issues are going to come up. And there could be emergencies. There could be standard issues, or like I need a presentation out, and I'm having issues with getting Microsoft Word or PowerPoint or something like that, working in the right way. So a high performing service desk team is actually extremely valuable to any organization. The way Domain goes about it is similar to other organizations, but there's one key difference. So number one is that you can get support through email. You can get it through a phone call. You can get it through a portal, an online portal where you can submit a request. And what's cool and exciting about Service Desk is you're going to start to see the ability to go through chat functionality here in the new future. So a lot of us are living in the Microsoft environment or the Google environment or even Slack, which is a chat functionality SaaS tool, where your IT company and organization are going to be able to work directly in some of those more immediate channels to help go through support, which is really cool. Where Domain sets ourselves apart is our tagline, or our CEO's tagline is reputation is your wealth. And reputation for us means a lot. We measure reputation inside our organization or inside our four walls with all of our employees. We also measure reputation externally. And this isn't just your standard like annual survey that we send out to our customers, like net promoter score kind of thing, where it shows us how we're doing. We actually go a step further, and on every single support ticket that gets sent in from every single user at any one of our companies, they're going to get what's called a customer satisfaction score survey. It's going to ask them to rate the engineer as well as the organization on how their experience was specifically on that one support ticket. And we do this on thousands of tickets every single month. So the reason we do this is we want to know what our reputation is. How are we doing live in real time with every single user within your organization? Not just the executives, not just the people that are paying the bills. We want to know how we're doing with everybody in your organization. So that's one way that we set ourselves apart in this area, is that I can tell you on every single client how we're doing, what our customer satisfaction score is for every engineer, for every account that we have across the entire company. So that's how we set ourselves apart there, because then it really gives the customer the understanding of what are they getting into and how serious are these folks about managing expectations and coming through on what they said they were going to do with all of my users in my organization.
Anthony, you said real time there, right? Real
Yeah.
time tracking. Could you walk me through that process? How does Domain track in real time? What does that look like?
Yeah, so pre-COVID, when we were in our office space all the time, live in our office, we had a bunch, I think 4 or 5 large TV monitors that were hung up in the office, and every single engineer is on that board, and we have integrations with the software tool that we use to monitor how our engineers are doing in real time on every single call. So they go up and down as these surveys start coming back and coming in, right? And our engineers are actually compensated. Part of their compensation is based on how well they're performing with those external customers that they're serving. So this is something we take very seriously. After COVID, we can come back into the office, and it was always one of the stopping points on the tour of our office that we would show people, and you could see the engineer's name and how everybody's doing. But this keeps everybody accountable as well. It's, it's public information within our organization on how everybody's doing and how they're treating our customers.
And you also mentioned, Anthony, that chat is coming soon in terms of a support option, or it'll be more prevalent. Today, is it fair to say that it would be email and phone-based support?
Yeah, the main two functions are email and phone. And actually, we always say our most preferred at Domain, and this may be different for other providers, and that's fine, but our most the way we would like most people to do it is through email. And the reason for that is there's always a log of everything, right? If you call in and leave a voicemail but forget to say your name or your company's name, how do we know where to go with it? It's very systematic. When you shoot us in an email, we know exactly where it's coming from. We know exactly who the user is, and it gets logged right away. And then there, our dispatch team starts to work on it, and just goes from there. So for us, the process is really more seamless when we get that email ticket. It loses some of the confusion that could potentially happen in an emergency type of situation.
Got it. And so if I'm an end user working at an organization of one of your clients, and I reach out to the support desk and I get domain support, how does that feedback come to me as the end user? Would that be, if I put in an email ticket, do I get an email thereafter which asks me to summarize my experience? What would it look like for an end user?
Yeah, so real quick, a basic issue, you take an email, you send it into the support line. We get that ticket, we acknowledge that ticket, so you get an automatic response that says, hey, we've received your issue, just kind of confirming that the email went through. We received your issue. Then right after that, you're going to receive another response that says, our dispatch team is working on this and working to assign it to the proper engineer. From there, we have obviously service level agreements, SLAs, or guaranteed response times based on the severity of that issue. If it's a basic password reset and nothing's really going crazy, it may be a little bit longer than if your server's down and nobody in the company can work. So based on the severity of the issue, we're going to have an SLA associated with that. From there, the engineer is going to get assigned. They're going to reach out to you. They're going to schedule a time or live do it right there with you to work on that request. They're also going to do, once they connect with you and you get your approval to connect with you, they're going to fix the issue, and then they're going to confirm that you can then do it yourself. What do I mean by that? And you've run into issues when you fix an issue for someone, like, oh, your Outlook's good to go. And like, oh, okay. And then the engineer runs away, and then you go right back in to try and do whatever you were trying to do that they said they fixed, and it's broken again, or you can't figure it out how they just got to where they got to. So our engineers are trained in making sure that, one, they fix the problem, and two, you walk yourself through while they're still there, that it's proven to be fixed, that you can now do what you needed to do. And then that's when they leave the conversation or the screen share or whatever the case may be. Once they go back in, they're going to log their time and their notes and everything on how they solve the issue. That way, everything's documented and it's in your, what we call a configuration. It's in our internal system. That way, the next engineer that potentially works with you is going to know other issues and other things that came up. And finally, once they complete the ticket on their end, that's when you're going to get that customer satisfaction survey to say, how did we do? It's going to have a picture of the engineer you worked with, and you're going to rate that engineer. And then it's going to have the company as well. And why do we rate the company? Well, you're not always going to be just directly engaging with the engineer. There's also a dispatch process where Acumen, we have two full-time employees that handle all the requests that are coming in and assign them out to the appropriate resources. We also want to know how they're doing and how your overall view of that support issue was. Not just the engineer may have been great, but we may have fumbled on something else. We want to be able to separate those two and understand that.
Got it. And so my final question related to the service desk, and I think you've touched on it a few times throughout some of the answers here, but it would be, what about the instance, if I'm a business owner, I'm considering a partnership with Domain Computer Services, what about those instances where the issue is not something that can be resolved immediately? Is there a specific escalation process that's followed? Is it taken offline? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And a lot of companies handle this differently. And at Domain, we've even moved around how we handle this process to best fit our customers. And the answer is that dispatch is educated in what each engineer is able to handle in terms of um, complexity is a good word for it. So, based on the details that the end user provides us in the support request, plus any additional details that our dispatch team is able to get out of that user, they are then trained to assign it to the appropriate resource in the appropriate amount of time. So, the goal is to get that right on the first try. Now, that being said, that's not always possible. We're all humans and we have different things, and each situation is different. If it turns out to be that that initial engineer cannot get it done, one, they're documenting everything they're doing and everything they've tried and the situation. That way, when it does get what's called escalated up to the next level of engineer, that engineer does not need to go through and ask you all those same questions again, state your issue again, all of that. That should not be it. There should be a very clear next step from that engineer that initially got it to the next engineer, or the higher level engineer, on what needs to be done next. And Jeremy, I'll clarify too here that a lot of the times the engineering levels comes down to security permissions, meaning that a basic issue could come in and it looks like it's pretty basic and it could be a quick fix. What'll often come out though is that there's a security level approval needed from either somebody that has the ability to approve those things, or internally at the customer site, a security change needs to be made, which we need a third part, that internal, what we call authorized contact, to validate that that change can be made. So a lot of the times it's really not even the skill set. The skill set is there. It's really the permissions based. And in today's day and age, if you have a managed service provider that is just allowing any user in the organization to request any changes that they want, that is not a great way to be doing it. And a lot of people are getting in a lot of trouble for basic things that could have been stopped from a checks and balance standpoint, that are just passing through because it's speed, it's quick, and the user's demanding it. A lot of times those engineers are trained in how to uh, discuss appropriately the need to go get an authorized contact's approval on a security thing instead of just doing it. Like, why can't you do it? Well, there's reasons for that now. So yeah, those are the two things there.
Yeah, it makes sense. And as a business owner, that would make me feel better. On the original question of escalation, it sounds like I have some insight into that process, that Domain is also proactive to prevent it from needing to be escalated in the future or decreasing the amount of time. And then from a permission standpoint, if that's the actual issue, I have some insight or control as a business owner. So the common theme that I'm picking up on here, Anthony, is proactivity. And I know I've heard a number of sales calls now where we've discussed the idea of spending as little time as we can on this quarter of the 4 blocks, this 1/4, which leads us to the other, and I leads us to the others, which I view to be more proactive. So I don't have a particular order here, but talk to us a little bit about how Domain handles proactivity.
Yeah. So the next block or area that we usually go to explain is called, what we call externally facing, is called IT systems. So it's, what are all of the systems that are in place? This could be physical hardware. It could also be technology or cybersecurity software solutions as well. But all of the IT systems that make up your environment, your office environment, or how you work every day. And the backbone of a lot of these the IT systems for any type of provider like us is called a RMM tool, or a remote monitoring and management tool. And that tool allows us to do a lot of things. It allows us to constantly monitor the health of the network. So this is the first thing that we implement to start to get a better feel of how you're doing. And we always like to compare, or I haven't done it as much recently, and maybe I should start bringing it back in, but compare IT to the medical fields. So to take it back a notch, service desk is like your emergency room, right? I'm pulling up, I need a quick fix. I need somebody to really start working on this right away. IT systems is really like your it's really like the blood pressure monitor, or the the Apple Watch that's constantly monitoring your vitals. These are the systems that are put in place to constantly understand and get real-time data on how your environment is working and what's going on in it. So there's systems to keep your infrastructure up and running. Hey, is the server down? Is it not down? Can we get to it before it goes down? Because if it goes down, now we're back to service desk. So a lot of these systems, and this is where you'll get managed service providers like us will start to develop more of their intellectual property on how they deliver things, is really starts to come into this area. There's specific scripts, there's specific scripts, there's different things that we can do internally, our intellectual property on how we set these things up to make sure they're getting done correctly. So the three that we like to talk about and that we require every company that works with us to have is a cybersecurity tool set. So this goes from the firewall that is in your organization and who is managing it, to internet content filtering, two-factor authentication, antivirus, all of these different layers of cybersecurity that organizations should put in place based on today's cybersecurity threats. The next one is backup and disaster recovery, which ties into business continuity. A lot of the times we go into organizations and they have a backup system that is supposedly running. It's supposedly being managed. It's supposedly being tested. The reason I say supposedly is that we do probably 5 technology assessments and gap analysis a month on average. And of all of those, we are typically coming back with a finding that says what you are being told has not been validated by a physical on-site inspection. And the sad part of this story is that we've had 2 customers in the last 4 months that have engaged with us. This has been one of their findings, and they believed us, but they were also being told something different by somebody they had a long-term relationship with, so they believed them as well. And then within 2 weeks of us doing those assessments, their backup has gone down, and they went to restore the backup and found out it was never in place. It had never been tested, and they lost 30 or 60 or 90 days worth of data since the last time it ran. So that's another big one that we check and that we're adamant about as well. We have a concept that I'm not a fan of the name, but it gets the job done. It's called one neck to choke. And you should be holding us responsible for cybersecurity, backup and disaster recovery, and business continuity. And in order to hold us responsible for those, you need to allow us to do it right, and it's got to be done and validated that these things are actually getting done. The final piece of this is a piece called patching and monitoring. And we just like to call this free security. A lot of people are not doing this. So patching is very simply the updates that you're getting asked to do. On a big side, they could be server updates. On a small side, they could be an Adobe or a Java update on your laptop. When those companies, those third parties are coming out and saying you need to update something, it's really a patch. It's a security vulnerability that they've found, and they're looking to cover it up. They're looking to fix it. So they release the fix to it. A lot of companies do not have this standardized. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy. And a lot of people don't even want to reboot their computers. You know, they keep hitting the remind me later. And that's not the answer. The answer is that those things need to get done if you want to, standardize your cybersecurity posture and not let people into vulnerabilities that are published publicly. So those are the 3 main components of the IT systems and how we approach those. what I like to say in this block as well is that all of these departments or these blocks at Domain are different departments with different engineers with different skill sets. There's a lot of times where we come into companies where the same person that handling my support request is monitoring my firewall and is coming on site as well as trying to be my CIO. It doesn't work that way. All of these are different skill sets. The engineer that's a great level 3 service engineer is great at working behind the scenes on the maybe over the phone and really like kind of navigating blind a little bit because they're not on site, they're not doing this. That's a different skill set. The engineer that needs to be in charge of your IT systems, that's a whole nother skill set. There's process oriented, there's detail oriented, all these different things of like making sure everything that's coming in, all this live data that's coming in is correct. What do I need to work on? What do I need to prioritize to fix? All of these things to make sure we stop and prevent the reactive issues from coming up. Leads me into the third block here on dedicated IT team. But before we get into that, Jeremy, was there any questions on the IT systems?
I do. I have one. So I see it in the explanation here, but let's suppose I'm that same business owner. I'm considering this partnership with Domain. I see here that a benefit of the IT systems block is that I get access to Domain's tech stack. So put myself in that business owner's shoes. What if I don't really have cybersecurity strategy, or I don't really have patching and monitoring strategy? Does that come with a partnership? Do we get access to your tools for that?
Exactly. Yeah. So one of the main things that a managed IT service provider needs to do is bring their technology stack into the picture, right? That allows us to deliver on all the things that you should be holding us accountable for. And once again, those are cybersecurity, backup and disaster recovery, and business continuity. If you're engaging with a managed IT service provider, you need to be holding them accountable for those three things. In order to hold us accountable, we need to bring our tool sets in there. Now there's, hey, this system works better than this system, this antivirus works better than that antivirus. We don't really get into the weeds with that. At the end of the day, a lot of the systems are very similar, and it's just how well they market each other. And the way Domain approaches this is that we don't fall in love with any one vendor, right? The vendor that we like for firewall is not the vendor that we like for content filtering. We have a layered security approach. We have a different vendor approach. In that case, let's say, for instance, SonicWall misses it on their firewall. Well, hopefully Cisco hits it on their content filtering. We're trying to layer those as well. And to your point, you as the business owner don't have to think about all these things, right? A lot of people are like, oh, the business owner will say, well, we have McAfee. And I'm like, I want to say, like, you don't even know what McAfee does or if it's good. Like, you don't even have the knowledge or the understanding or the time to be able to go in and look at these things. And the final piece of this, which is mentioned in the little paragraph here, which hopefully we'll share or at least get on the video here, is that we like to say that Chris, our director of engineering, likes to say that the firewall or whatever system is only as good as the person who sets it up. And the best example I typically have of this is the firewalls. Back in the day, people would buy firewalls, they'd plug them in their office, they'd connect the internet, and that'd be it. And at that point, it's just a box sitting there navigating your internet for you, not really doing much. You actually have to go in there. A security engineer has to go in there and configure that firewall properly, has to enable all the security services that are layered on top of that firewall. And what happens typically is that somebody who doesn't have the greatest knowledge will go in there, enable some of these things, and it'll break other systems that are in place. So they quickly go back and they uncheck the boxes. Now the other system works, but you're not as secure as you could potentially be. So it takes more of an understanding of how to set these things up properly and get them to work with the rest of your environment. We walk into a ton of organizations that have internal IT managers or even CIOs that are also at fault of a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about here, right? It doesn't work for this one program, so I'm just going to turn it off and leave it alone. It's not the best way to approach it. So it's not only the tool set, but it's also the knowledge and configuration of those tools to make everything work together.
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think it's a good segue into the dedicated IT team. But how does Domain prevent some of that, those issues that you just outlined in terms of a knowledge gap around these systems? How does Domain serve as an extension of your client's team?
Yeah, so the last two things that we just spent some time on are all behind the scenes, right? They're all done remotely. They're all done from Domain's headquarters in Cranberry, New Jersey. All these engineers are behind the scenes. The service desk engineers, the centralized services or IT systems engineers, they're all behind the scenes. So how do we get out in front of this? How do we act as an extension of your team? Well, what Domain does is we have what's called a primary and a secondary engineer, or in their language, a network administrator, who's assigned to each organization. And there's a couple key things that they do. Number one, if you have a physical office space, pre or post COVID, we physically come on site. Whether you want us to be there or not, we will be there every single month. And there's a couple reasons for this. Number one is that the IT industry, our industry in general, would love to tell you that everything could be done remotely. Why? It saves them a ton of costs and time and energy in terms of travel and humans on the road and all this different stuff, right? So they want to do everything as remotely as possible. Domain has kind of flipped that on its head and said, hold on a second, we're not going to walk away from this component because we know it's not the best way to do it. So our team goes on site, a primary or secondary engineer comes on site, and they are going to have a proactive checklist of work that needs to be done when they get to your office. Why is that important? Well, there wouldn't be a proactive checklist of work if there wasn't things that we needed to check if we weren't on site, right? So we have to come on site to do this type of work. There's lights, there's things that just don't get notified or sent back to the IT systems team that things are going wrong. So these proactive visits get us out to there to physically inspect, let's call it the server closet, the climate, the temperature within that room. How does that look? Is it locked? Is it not locked? Let's go through and check out your backup battery power. Let's check out your switches, your servers, your firewalls. Let's make sure all of these things are set up and working and as properly as possible. So they have that's one component. The second component is you may have all of a sudden an influx or just some tickets, service desk related tickets that have been kind of sitting there because somebody needs to be on site to actually fix the issue. Like it can't be done remotely. So they're there then to do that. Like, hey, if we're going to spend time at our client's site, we want to make sure that all the service tickets that are in the queue for that organization are getting worked on with the engineer that's there to do it. And that starts to develop that personal relationship with the users as we're there. The final piece of this too is to really be part of the team, right? A lot of our engineers are getting invited out to their company events or getting invited to all different types of birthday party celebrations and whatnot. And the primary point of contact, the way this works is that the engineer is going to come on site. They're going to first check in with our primary point of contact and say, is there anything that you need us specifically to do today? Anything that's bubbling to the top, whatnot. Really just kind of develop that, hey, I'm here. You know, this is what I'm going to do. If there's nothing there, they move on to that proactive work, and then they circle back on the service desk related types of issues. Finally, they check out for the day. Hey, they go back to the primary contact and they say, hey, this is what we got done today. This is what we're doing. And I'm going to move on. I'll see you again later. Right. So we're really trying to get that human element going. The final thing here on how we start to engage with people is that the way Jeremy interacts with technology and the way that I interact are completely different. So if Jeremy submits multiple service desk tickets to handle the same recurring issue over and over and over again, eventually service desk is going to reach out to that primary engineer, and they're going to say, hey, when you're on site, can you go work with Jeremy and tell him, or work with him specifically on how to work through this issue. Maybe Jeremy works better when somebody physically shows him how to do something versus it always being done remotely. So now, say Anthony's that engineer, I get a more personalized, deeper relationship with you as a user, and you actually feel the love from your quote unquote IT department as truly part of the team.
And Anthony, I'm curious. So you mentioned the importance of having folks on site who are serving as an extension of the team, but as that business owner, again, imagining how this partnership is going to work, I'm curious how you have any sense of those things, that proactive checklist that you talked about, until you're actually in the environment. Is there any steps that are taken beforehand to get a sense of a proactive checklist so that the dedicated engineers know what they're walking into?
Yeah, so there's two things. The first one, and the quick and easy one that I can quickly get out of the way, is that it's built up of time, knowledge, and experience, right? Of across all environments, and it's crafted from that. I think we're 23, 24 years deep now in all that knowledge. The second way is that as part of our process, if a company is considering joining up with Domain or partnering with Domain on as a true IT department for them, is we're going to do something called a technology assessment and cybersecurity gap analysis. And we're going to go in there and truly get our hands dirty. We're not going to go in there, or let me just tell you what we're going to do. We're going to come on site 2 to 3 hours, and we're going to physically go through everything: your server room, your servers, your switches, your firewalls, the configurations, the switches, the wiring. We're going to go to and sample a handful of user setups across the office. We're going to go through all of this kind of stuff. We're going to ask about the backup plans, the cybersecurity plans, who owns these things, what type of compliance do you need to do. And that is then going to create this physical document and knowledge of everything that you have going on prior to us even joining. So that way, if we do join, you do decide to move forward with somebody like Domain, you're gonna know that we know exactly what we're getting into, and we're gonna be confident we know exactly what we're gonna get into, and what are the quick wins that we're gonna need to have. What are the common issues? We're usually being brought in, and there's common issues. They come out in the first call. It'll be 30 minutes, 45 minutes of somebody telling us all the things that are going on. This assessment and gap analysis allows our engineers to go on site and then go through and truly figure out. At the end of that, we come back with what's called a solutions presentation, and we show them all the gaps that are in the environment. We're going to break it down for people on, is this business impact high, medium, or low? And then we're going to craft those solutions, and it's up to you to decide on if you want to do them yourselves, if you want us to do them, or if you want a third party to do them, that's fine. But what we find is that a lot of companies don't even know what's going on. Even if they have a current provider, everything is always like an emergency, or I just found out I have to reinvest, $50,000 into new computers for everyone because they're 10 years old. Like that, all of those things need to be cut off at the start, and there needs to be a continuous plan. Our technology assessment and cybersecurity gap analysis is the first model of that for that new organization. And it's somewhat of a breath of fresh air because it allows them to finally start to think forward about IT, not just constantly always thinking backwards about IT, right? And the goal, as we mentioned in Service Desk, if it's painful or not, is it exciting? The goal is start to work on the exciting things with technology and what it can do for your business. If you're always just working on the painful, reoccurring issues, you never get to work on or answer the questions of what are the technologies that can make our team more productive? What are the technologies that would allow our team to work better remotely? What are the technologies that will allow us to communicate better internally and externally with both our employees and our customers? How can I set up my conference rooms to be able to do better presentations for boards or investors. Like there's a lot of exciting things that can go into technology. And I always relate it back to like you picking up the newest iPhone. Like you're excited. It's like, ooh, what can this camera do? Like, ooh, what's the newest feature of Siri? Like it could be that or a gaming system, like I want to get IT to the fun parts, where it's really going to make a difference for your business. And that's where we're trying to go.
That makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like your team comes in with insights already. And you mentioned there in your answer that a lot of this partnership is forward thinking. So back to the business owner, if my sole goal as a business owner is to accelerate growth in my company, and I'm a business owner who understands the importance of technology to do that, how does a partnership with Domain Computer Services help me? How does your team help consult me on how technology can accelerate that growth?
Yeah, so we have a role within our organization, and I think other providers do too, but our approach may be slightly different in that we have a role called VCIO, or Virtual Chief Information Officer, which is part of your dedicated IT team. And their goal is to make sure as part of that, they're leading the relationship with you. They're making sure that all the service desk, the IT systems, the network admins and IT team that are all dedicated to you are all working as they should. If anything is a red flag or customer satisfaction is off or we're not coming through on what we promised, they're the ones that are meant for that. And but the point to your question is that their role is really to move that needle to what does forward thinking look like. That way I'm not walking into 2021 or 2022 or whatever year it is with my tail between my legs because I have no idea what's next in my technology or what I need to do. So in our company, in order to be a VCIO, you need to be a senior level engineer. That's number one. You have to really master all the systems and the ways we provide support and all of that. You need to be a senior level engineer. That's factor one. Number two, though, is business acumen. And business acumen is difficult to judge, right? Not everybody's got it. A lot of people want to just stay that senior level engineer and they want to get deeper and deeper involved in the tech. And that's great. And there's roles for them as well. But for a VCIO, what a business owner should really be thinking about is, does this person understand my business? Do they understand where I'm trying to go? And can they get me there? Like they may get it, but they may not be able to get me there. So for us, it's a combo of engineering talent along with business acumen. So I understand business, I understand financials, I understand costs, I understand how you make money, I understand how you service your clients, and I understand what technologies or what evaluations I'm going to need to do to make you better and better at that. Because at the end of the day, our goal is to make you succeed. If you succeed, then the more you succeed, the better we do as a company as well. So they're going to lead productivity strategy, technology reviews, infrastructure strategy, right? A lot of the conversations we're having now is, do I move to the cloud? Do I not? What does that look like? And you really got to dig into that. It's not an easy answer. It's not just move to the cloud. That's not the right answer. And any provider out there that's just telling you to move to the cloud, it's because that's the only thing they do. And that's what they're compensated for. Usually what we find is a hybrid strategy. So working through these ideals that come through, standardization and licensing, planning and budgeting, all of these things are going to come from that person. And by the way, as it states, virtual chief information officer, a lot of these organizations can't afford a full-time chief information officer. And if they did, they wouldn't be able to afford anything else that went with it. So what you're getting is you're getting a fraction of somebody's time that's really good at what they do. The other benefit of that, especially when working with a company like Domain, is that these virtual chief information officers have probably 20 to 30 clients that they're working with. So they're seeing multiple different industries. They're seeing this, maybe the multiple or the same problems over and over and over again. So you're getting all of that knowledge when you engage with somebody like this, and that's invaluable. You can't even put a price on what that means of, I'm a small business with 50 employees in one location. And now I'm trying to figure out how to go completely virtual or open up another office in another location. Well, why don't you go talk to somebody that's already done that? That's done that 10 times and can just walk you right through the process and help you manage that.
And Anthony, would they, as part of that, because I mean, it almost, as I hear this out loud, it sounds too good to be true in a sense, right? Because I'm getting all of these other areas that we've discussed, but I'm also getting a CIO, virtual, albeit. But do they make recommendations on to me to better my business? In other words, if we're assessing or evaluating the two different providers, two different vendors, are they helping to make recommendations to my business goals as well? Are they an extension of my executive team?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes. And I can give you maybe two examples on this that'll make it more concrete. The two main examples is we'll start with one is some companies out there use what's called an ERP. I'm skipping on the E.
Enterprise resource planning.
There you go. ERP, Enterprise Resource Planning tool, right? That runs their entire business. These things cost anywhere from probably 50, 100,000 up to millions of dollars to not only implement, but then also train on all of these things from purchasing product, logistics, accounting, all of these things. Your whole business is running on this. So to make a move from one of these tools to another is a risk. It could be risky to move this. It could be good risk in that if you do move it, you're getting to the next level. You're going to be able to revolutionize your business potentially. The problem is that a lot of the individuals involved in that decision, it could be your CFO, your chief operating officer, your CEO, obviously. These individuals don't have the technology background to do this. So you need a true CIO to evaluate the technical aspects of these systems and are what they saying, is it real? Is it actually real? And even further than that, what do we need to put in place from a technology perspective to make these systems operate the way they say they should operate, right? What infrastructure do we need to now invest in to get the newest and brightest ERP system? Another quick example I'll give you on this, Jeremy, is very similar, but like we deal with a lot of law firms. They have document management systems that hold all of their documents and the way they operate those things. They also have what's called practice management systems, and not as big of a lift as ERP systems in terms of complexity, but they can be pretty complex. And there's a lot of times where a law firm will get frustrated with one document management system or one practice management system, and they want to evaluate another. You're talking $50,000 to $100,000 in some sort of subscription, and they get to a point where like it looks and feels good, and everything they're being told is great. But what are the cybersecurity protocols? What infrastructure do we need to have in place? Is my data being backed up? Some of these more technical, detailed questions that need to be asked, they're not there for. So in that way, our CIOs work directly with those organizations to have the technology conversation and then come back to you with an unbiased opinion on those things. So then you and your team can make a business decision on what makes sense.
Yeah, exactly like it sounds in the definition there in consulting, but I was curious if those recommendations would actually be made, and it's got to be an invaluable resource, especially as a small business owner, if you're not familiar with technology or you just need that unbiased opinion. Anthony, I know we teed this whole conversation up with the area that most MSPs spend the most amount of time. Kind of hitting you off guard here, but what's the problem with spending too much time in the service desk as it relates to the proactivity we talked about? What should I be concerned about if I'm a business owner looking at another MSP and it's mostly service desk based? What should I be concerned about?
Yeah, the simple answer to that is they don't have time to do any of the other areas, right? If I'm only handling Jeremy's service request tickets, and that's what my team is focused on, am I really focused on the proactive side of this, the proactive things I could be doing to make sure those aren't happening? Do I really have the time then to focus on moving your business to the next level? Because at the end of the day, the answer is no. If I'm receiving a funnel and one after the next based on the number of clients I have of service desk things, I need to constantly be attending to them. Like my emergency room is full, right? The IT systems is all those blood pressure monitors and different systems that they have in place. Those things are like, I remember when my wife was pregnant and one of the machines was just beeping like crazy. And I had to get up and go, make a notice. Like, think about it in IT. If one of those systems is saying, hey, the target breach, everybody knows about the target breach now. It's probably 10 years old now, but the target breach, they had the $1 million piece of equipment in there telling them that they were being breached, and they had just let go of the people to watch that system that could have prevented it, right? So if I'm only up in service desk and that's all I'm talking about, what happens when the alarm's going off? I can't get to the alarm. I got all these things going on over here. We talked about the dedicated IT team, and I didn't give you the medical acknowledgement to that, but that's really kind of very similar to nurses, right? Nurses are constantly coming in. They have their set schedule. Hey, if you're in the hospital, I need to be checking in you here, and here. That's really that, to kind of get ahead of those things. Make sure your blood pressure is still checked. Make sure your blood's drawn. Make sure you're having your medication. That's the proactive nature of those things, so that you don't have the next heart attack or you don't have another issue while you're sitting there with them. And then finally, that IT consulting or that VCIO is very similar to the doctor, right? Asking you all those analysis types of questions to really get to the root cause of things, and then have a plan for going forward and prescribe the right solutions to get you there. So I think that's a great place to probably end in the final analysis of the medical field and IT. And especially during COVID, I highly respect all the medical professionals that are doing what they need to do and putting themselves in the line of fire kind of on per se in this. So yeah, that's it. You need all four of those. And if your current IT company or an IT company comes in and is only really talking about one of those things, it's probably going to be less expensive. I can almost guarantee you that. But it's probably not going to get you the result that you want. So I would always caution everybody I've never paid less for something and gotten the result that I wanted. It's always either resulted in more money later, or I've had to go with a better investment to get the result that I truly want.
You get what you pay for in this world. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeremy. See you, man. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. This guarantees that every episode will get delivered directly to your device. To help us get the word out, share with a friend, leave a review, and check out our discussions on the web at go-domain.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.